Yeah. How so I actually grew up with a brother on the autism spectrum, so I'm
Mhm.
pretty familiar, but I feel like things have changed drastically probably from then and now.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of curious, how have you observed changes in the way that autism is discussed and the way that it's approached and all of that?
Well, I've been in the field now for 23 years and I've seen significant changes, I have to say. I mean, you probably hear that I refer to autistic children or autistics or autistic adults. And that is really coming from this surge in the neurodiversity movement that's going on and has been going on for and coming to the forefront um, in the past 5 to 8 years, I'd say. And adults, because there's so much more awareness of autism and the more and more supports for people with autism, I think that autistic adults are able to tell us what it was like growing up, what helped them, what didn't help them, how they want to be viewed, what they want to be called, you know? And so in my field, there was such a focus on first person, person language. So we would focus on, a child with autism. And the feedback we're getting more and more and more from self advocates, people with autism, is that I'm autistic. I want to be called autistic. I want to. I was diagnosed with Asperger's. I still want to be called.
Mm.
I I have Asperger's. So I think there's just been this really amazing movement to kind of push us forward to, instead of viewing deficit, and even in my field, even though the way a speech pathologist looks at a child is we find their strengths and their weaknesses, right? And then we try to remediate those weak spots in language and communication. We talk about it more now as what are the supports that we need to put into place so that they can have control over their communication and their world, right? And we utilize strengths to support social communication. So it's a really different view. We've moved away from this kind of deficit model. I think the challenge is that when you're doing assessments and you're going through the process of getting the diagnosis, insurance companies, school systems, all
Mm.
of the entities need are going to see things a little bit more like a deficit, and we have to document deficits.
Mm.
And I think that's the challenge for parents, especially for parents of very young children.
Yeah, one of the things I also liked about I don't know, did you design the class More Than Words, or were you part of it,
The
obviously?
class is designed by a group, the Hannon Group, that's out
Oh,
of
right.
Toronto. But I went through extensive training to be able to provide the program. So I'm a certified Hannon speech language pathologist, and it's only speech pathologists that can run those programs. So.
Oh, okay. One of my favorite things actually in the class was when you tried to let the adults see what it would be like, kind of, to be autistic. And you, first of all, I'm terrible at spelling, so it was already a rough one. But you said, everybody, here's a piece of paper and a pen, and then one of you went to the back of the room and started flicking the lights on and off. Another person, I believe, put on the song "Enter Sandman" really loud, and then you started rattling off words faster than we could possibly spell them, which and it was so disorienting. And you're like, and that's an idea, or at least one of the flavors of what autism is like. It's that's why they that's why they stim, and that's why they, you know, look out for, the stimulus is too much and stuff. So I thought that was really helpful to me because it gave me perspective.
Yeah, I think, even though that that activity is kind of an exaggerated activity. It may not be that exaggerated for some autistic individuals.
Right.
The level of sensory overload and how that, and we've been learning more and more and more about that. And it's such a crucial piece for all support personnel, teachers, any professionals that are working with autistic individuals to understand and to gain themselves, because it explains a lot of what we consider unusual behaviors sometimes, or I'm overwhelmed and so I can't communicate right now. And I think, Jason, that I'm so glad that that's a hard thing to go through, but it does give you some sense of what overload may feel like for your child.
It's really interesting. So I've done I've done health and wellness and mental health writing for years now, and I've done a lot on these subjects. And this is the first time that I've heard of an exercise like what Jason is describing. And I can imagine it's so helpful for people that just would have no point of reference for how somebody might feel.
And it is a spectrum, so it could be a lot more worse than that, or it could be a lot better than that. So, like Luke actually isn't like that. He's very attention seeking, I believe, if I'm using the right term. He loves to touch things, loves like bright blinky lights. He loves sound. He like listens to music. He loves when I sing to him. He loves shows, like everything. And a lot of times when I pick him up, there are children that I see that they don't like anything, and that's where I feel like I was very fortunate, and it just, my heart breaks when I see parents having to deal with that, because I don't know where I would find the strength. So it just makes me just want to I don't know, give them some kind of energy or something, and I'm sure it's different because it's your child, you're gonna love them and stuff, but it's amazing, some parents, what they go through and the strength that they have for helping their child. I mean, I got lucky. Luke is just an absolute angel and is never in a bad mood, and that's very fortunate.
Yes, it's wonderful. He is a sweetheart, definitely a sweetheart. And individuals on, autistic individuals, all of these kind of sensory things can vary day to day, just kind of the way they do for us. I mean, there's a lot of things that we do that are either sensory seeking or to eliminate it. When I first get up in the morning, I can't have loud sounds, loud noises. I've got to kind of acclimate to getting up and awake. If I'm sitting in a lecture and it's going on and on, I'm getting bored, I might tap my foot, I might do these things that kind of help me regulate my body. And so some of the things that autistic individuals are doing are ways that they figured out, just like we figure out how to regulate information. For some individuals, that's going to change hour to hour, day to day, in certain situations, depending on what those challenges are. But, for Luke, for example, it's more the sensory seeking. He needs a lot of input, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so, once we know that for a specific individual or child, we can provide them those things that give him that gets the sensory seeking piece met. And the more he gets his sensory needs met, the more regulated and the more ready to learn and to process information that he is. So it's a key piece of what we all do.
Yeah, I feel like the key thing is to excite whatever it is they're attracted to, and implement rewards based on that, and then use other techniques to guide the child to learn things that are a little more mainstream, so that they can function as best as possible without losing themselves. That was said pretty well, wasn't it?
That was, Jason, that was exactly. And I would say that it was great. I mean, it was absolutely what you hear a lot of autistic adults say. They are viewing their life as needing support, but not fixing them, because there's nothing wrong with them. and we don't want to change people that, and in the history of the work that we've done, and even over my time as a clinician, I look back now and I think, wow, I can't believe I was doing some of those things, because I have such a better perspective of what that's like hearing from autistic adults now.
So I can tell you from just my experience, my brother's an adult now. Whatever was done back then seems to have done a huge amount of harm, because everything was deficit focused, and so you could still has internalized that, and and I think because he internalized that so young, because that's how everything was done, and it's hard for him to kind of get out of that shift, and he does not like the label autism at all, and is like vehemently against it, and he's got a friend who's also on the spectrum who feels the same way, and I suspect it's because of the way things were done back then, that they're just so averse to it, and it's really it's sad, because like I look at kids and like I'm glad that they're getting much better support, but yeah, you can really see, to me, I feel like it's apparent that all of the deficits in the understanding, then led to telling people, that they had those deficits. So it's nice to see things progress in a much better way. So it's I feel like it's better to be an autistic kid today than it was like 30 years ago, or so.
I wholeheartedly agree with that. And we're much more aware now that the impact that has on development of self-esteem, mental health, which is a significant challenge for many autistic individuals. And it does make me realize that, if the message that's been sent all of those years at a young age is you have deficits, then how do you view yourself and your capability? And then I could go this step further and understand why you might want to not be associated with a label, right? Makes a lot of sense to me.
That's totally true. I was put into all the special classes when I was in school, learning disability. ADHD didn't exist yet, really, or they didn't know what it was. So I was put in all these special classes, like the whatever resource room and all kinds of stuff like that. And they kind of write you off too. They go, well, we know what you're capable of, so let's just get you through. And they actually ended up graduating me, and I had a 1.6 grade point average, which I personally think you should keep a kid back until he does better. But they were just like, out the door, good luck. And then I did really good in college, because the way I am is if I'm interested, I'm really good at it. But if I'm not, I just don't care, which is bad for the way school is. Well, I don't know about today, but then.
And that's not uncommon for many autistic individuals, many will do much better at the college level, because then they're more focused on interests, things that are motivating, but things that they're not motivated by, and we kind of all work that way. That's not unusual or different, I think. I chose to go into what I went into, and was very interested in disability from a young age, because my older brother has learning disability, and I watched him struggle. I watched him placed into remedial classes. This was before IDEA that protected and provided special education. He was put in remedial classes with kids that were not learning disabled, but had other kinds of issues. And they were, even at the young age of like by third grade, they were doing social promotion. So he hadn't even achieved third grade level work, and they were going to promote him in fourth grade. My parents kind of had to pull him out of the public school and put him in a private school and get him caught up, because exactly that, Jason, like he wasn't ready. And I watched him struggle, lots of tutoring, and he's made his way, and he's extremely successful, and he has a master's degree and is doing
Nice.
really, really, really well. But the struggles and the social challenges and the bullying and all of the things that happened to him as a child, and how he was treated through the system was such a push for me, and with my interest with disability and supporting those who have challenges came from a personal experience.
Yeah. Wow. That's great that he's doing so well. That's
Yeah.
wonderful. Yeah, they should probably
Yeah.
change something in the public system a little bit. Like, hey, you know what? We
Mm.
have a different course for this person, a different avenue,
Mhm.
not just push them through.
Right.
Yeah, and I know like so many stories, Jason, that are not unlike yours, where either somebody was left behind or pushed through, or just something with the public school system. It's clearly not meeting people's needs the way it needs to be. And my guess, based on everything that's going on now, is that it has not gotten any better. I mean, I don't really know anybody actively with people in the public school system, but what I can see from the news and the state of teachers leaving, my guess would be that it's probably not getting any better.
I think it depends on the state too.
Yep.
Like in Vermont, Luke was assigned a 1-to-1 for like ever. Like he's going to have a 1-to-1 person through his school career. Whereas my friend in Florida, who's a teacher, is like, do not bring Luke to Florida. Just don't. And so, I mean, I think that has a lot to do with it too, depending on where you live.
Mm,
I agree.
yeah, good point.
I agree so much. Since I've moved here to Los Angeles, some of the things that I saw in Vermont that were so supportive are so much harder to access here. And families, no matter that the fact that an individualized education plan is a legal document, there are federal laws around special education, families are still fighting to get their children what is truly needed for them. And I think the struggle is that a lot of this comes down to socioeconomic status, where people living in more affluent areas with more income that goes into the schools and the public schools may have access to all of these things, and other areas don't. This is the same thing that I saw when I lived in Baltimore and lived in Baltimore City. And then what happens is a lot of families who have the means move to the areas where there's more supports, right? And then all of the funding goes with them. So it is a challenging situation, I think, for families. And it goes state by state and county by county, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So you just said Baltimore, which is very strange. That's where I'm from.
Oh, really?
Originally. So you've lived where Jason is now and where I'm from and where I am now. It's funny
Yeah.
how that works. So
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I
were
lived
you there temporarily, or?
I lived in the Annapolis area for about 6-7 years, and then Baltimore another 5 years.
Okay.
So my first position as a speech language pathologist out of school, because I went to Towson University,
which is where I went, which is really funny. Very
okay,
funny.
Your soccer.
it's a very small world. Crazy. So yeah, so I did my graduate work at Towson University, and I went to work at Kennedy Krieger Institute, which is a part of Johns Hopkins, and I worked there for 9 years. 8 of those was at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. So that's where I really gained my training and knowledge and all of my interest in working with autistic individuals and their families. So.